I've been reading a lot of articles regarding the recent judgment of the Supreme Court regarding the banning of the sale of liquor in shops and establishments which are within 500 square meters, within 500 meters of state and national highways. Now, these articles, there's a pattern in all these articles. The pattern is that the Supreme Court has overreached itself. It has indulged in judicial overreach, and it basically should stick to its role of interpreting the Constitution rather than enter into the domain of the executive. Now, the pattern in all these articles is that there's distribution of powers, and thus the judiciary should not enter into the domain of the executive. And by passing such kind of judgments, the judiciary is actually overreaching itself and entering the domain of the executive. Now, most of these articles are essentially, they are statements of legal ignorance. Now, I'm dead sure that the authors of these articles have actually not read the judgment. If they had read the judgment, they would have discovered that the judgment is not picked out of the air. It is not created on a vacuum of a foundation. The foundation is solid. The Supreme Court has a major role of aligning all the rules and laws to the Constitution of the country. It is also a protector of the Constitution of the country. It's a protector of the fundamental rights of the people of the entire country. Thus, all the laws have to be aligned to the Constitution of the country. Now, in this process of alignment, the Supreme Court has to sometimes enact judicial law so that the Constitution is protected, so that the fundamental rights are protected. The Supreme Court also has to strike down provisions of the law which are not in alignment with the statutory provisions, which are not in alignment to the framework of the Constitution. Thus, all these Supreme Court judgments, or this specific Supreme Court judgment, is built upon legal principles which are time tested. It is built upon statutory interpretation of the Constitution. It is built upon the fundamental rights of the people of the country, including all the accident victims, all the victims who lose their lives due to drunken driving on the highways. What about their rights? Their rights are not important. Only the rights of the restaurant owners are important. The rights of the victims of drunken driving are not important. People who lose their lives. Article 21, which is the right to life, is enshrined in the Constitution, and it is the Supreme Court's role to protect that right, to protect that fundamental right of the people of the country. So therefore, when the Supreme Court carves out a judgment like this, it is a well-reasoned judgment which draws on multiple sources of wisdom and knowledge, and on that foundation the Supreme Court builds a judgment. It is not built out of thin air. Now, most of these articles are written by people who actually, it seems, have not really read the judgment, and neither do they understand how these judgments are created. They are fundamentally displaying an ignorance of the law. Now, without reading the judgment, without understanding the legal principles on which the judgment has been created, without understanding the different provisions of the law which have been applied by the Supreme Court, this just randomly stating that there's judicial overreach, looking at only the periphery, that there's distribution of power, that's a very peripheral logic which is being used in most of these articles. And these articles are appearing in quite a few newspapers. So I really feel that these authors better do their research, legal research, much better before writing these articles, because these articles can actually lead the people of India in the wrong direction, right? When the Supreme Court passes such a judgment, and it is not only passed by the Supreme Court, it has been reiterated by another bench, that fundamentally indicates that the entire logic of building up and creating and carving out this judgment has been checked. Each and every element has been checked by the Supreme Court before the judgment has been passed. So I really recommend that these people who are writing these articles, who are criticizing this Supreme Court judgment as judicial overreach, had better do their homework and their legal research much better before writing these articles.